everybody, and welcome to Homicide Life on the Set. We are in our virtual coffee room about to chew the fat about the streaming. So Homicide is now available on Peacock, which is amazing.
Yay.
It's still not available outside of the US, but you Americans are very lucky to see it. I've been lucky to see it because I've got a few connections. It's, yeah, I'm really pleased with it. But Susan, what are your sort of initial thoughts on the streaming?
Yeah, the first thought was, yay.
Yeah.
And I was going to buy a bottle of champagne for this morning, but I figured since we're recording at 7:30, I wouldn't be able to make best use of it. Yeah. Let me down a bottle of champagne and then go on my date. No. So, first of all, it was just, I really feel like it's been far too long, but finally getting its respect. Like, it is actually out there and available. I did not know it wasn't available in Europe or in the UK. You think you get on the internet, you can go anywhere. So I didn't know that. Yeah. So that's boo hiss. So we need to have it available. Around the world.
Yeah. Eventually, I'm sure it will catch up. I have my suspicions of where it will air because most Peacock shows end up on Now TV in the UK. So my theory is, obviously I could be completely wrong, but I have a theory it'll be on Now TV, which will match up with all the other HBO content and Peacock stuff. So it'll kind of be next to The Wire. Which, so it will. I don't know when they're planning to screen it in Europe, but I've luckily, through the power of a VPN and some personal connections in the States, I got access to Peacock and managed to watch most of season 1. You're ahead of me. I think you're on season 3 now, aren't you?
I'm on. Yes. Yeah, I just finished. I wanted to watch the 3-part White Glove Murders.
Yeah, excellent.
And I just finished those. And then because you loved the Crosetti episode, I watched the teaser, the opener for the Crosetti episode. So.
Well, I watched Crosetti this morning.
Oh, did you? Yeah, I was watching it this morning.
And it really moved me, actually.
Yes.
Yeah. I thought I just wanted to see a season 3 episode just to see, because obviously it's 2 different cinematographers. You had Wayne Ewing.
Wayne was season 1, and Jean came in on the short season 2.
And then season 3 onwards. And just wanted to see the difference between the look. The streaming looks amazing. It's the best Homicide's ever looked, in my opinion. My main observation, and I had a question actually. So it appears to be 16:9. And it's not 4:3 because I compared it this morning. So I've sent you this very crude photo I took because season 3.
Yeah, I looked at it. It sort of blew me away. I'm like, wait a minute. How?
Yeah, so I'm assuming you guys shot open gate.
So the one that shows more of the diner is the 16:8.
Yeah, that's the Peacock version, and then the.
So I have a feeling I know what your question's going to be, but go ahead, and then I'll not be able to answer it.
Weirdly, 5 years ago, I bought season 3 of Homicide on Apple. It was the only season available, so technically you could stream Homicide season 3. 5 years ago, almost actually to the point, because I was streaming it on a train. So I was watching it on a train ride every morning to this job I was doing out of London. And it was like a 2-hour commute each way. So I ended up watching like 2 episodes of Homicide over the commute. And so I this morning I was to watch Crosetti, which I've been watching on my laptop. And I kind of put it on. I was on my main computer. I put up the Apple version. And then below on my laptop, I put up the Peacock version. And just to see, because I noticed when I was watching on Peacock, it does appear to be 16:9. And usually when they do 16:9 on a 4:3 show, they kind of crop in. So I was a bit concerned. And to my pleasant surprise, it's the opposite. They've kind of come out. So it looks like, it looks to me like you guys shot what we call open gates. So in post, you can fiddle around with it. Because the 16:9 version looks amazing. You see so much more detail in the shot. So in the photo I sent you is a scene where Bayliss and Pemberton are in the cookie shop buying the cookies for the funeral, and above Tim you can see the sign for the cookie shop. You can see a collection of what looks like croissants to his right. You got a bit more detail on Pemberton, and you can see behind Pemberton's back a few things. I was just like, wow, this really is great. It's a lot wider. And then the other thing I've noticed, it's more colourful, so the colours really pop out. It's obviously a lot sharper. Yes. And there's a less of a desaturated look, because the Apple version, which looks like it's just pulled straight from the DVD or the probably the digibeta that they used to make the DVD, looks very desaturated and also has a weird blue cast. So the other thing I've noticed, it looks warmer on Peacock than it does when you watch it on the DVD or the Apple version. I have it. There's a slight blue cast on the original version that's now missing, and it does slightly look a bit more like Law and Order. Funnily enough, not in a bad way, but just ever so slightly. And weirdly, when I first watched the pilot episode, I thought, my God, this is like watching a movie. It looks so much more cinematic, and I was really, really pleased. So I think visually, and even from the sound levels as well, everything sounds really good. Because the other thing with the DVD, the audio is occasionally a bit muffled, and in particular, for some reason, it was Yaphet's dialogue never quite came through as well as it could have done, whilst on the Peacock version, he sounds crystal clear and it's great. But I do know there have been some complaints about the music. And funnily enough, I've had a weird revelation. I think in Europe, we might have had a whole different set of music for Homicide that I'd never noticed as different to the American one. Because I had this with Miami Vice. In Miami Vice, quite a few of the music cues are very different.
Really?
And so I'm wondering whether the version that you're all seeing for the first time is kind of like the same music that we had on the European DVD release, because I've got the European DVD, not the American one, and obviously my memories of Homicide go back to the 90s, and my musical knowledge is not that fantastic, but there's one or two songs that really do stand out from Homicide, but I don't know the music as in depth as you guys. But when I was watching Cressetti this morning, I had both I synced it up so I could watch the Apple one and the Peacock one side by side. The music was no different on the versions that I had. So I'm wondering whether, this is like the international release, because obviously, there's been a lot of complaints about the music because not all of the songs are intact from the original, which is a shame. But those are my kind of initial ramblings about the Peacock release. But I think it looks fantastic. So
yeah. So your question about did we shoot open gate? My recollection is that it was made clear we specially were shooting in Super 16, which means a little bit larger negative. You push the frame out very close to the sprocket holes so that you get a larger negative. These are all questions for NBC Universal, or maybe I should go back to Jean, although Jean might not, remember either. So I was shocked when, because I haven't had a chance to do a side-by-side yet. I need to do the DVD version in the TV room and the Peacock version in my bedroom and take pictures or run back and forth. So that was shocking to see the side by side you just showed and the cookie scene was in Vaccaro's downtown, the Italian bakery. So to see, because I thought the same thing was going to happen. I thought what was going to happen was, because they were making it from 4:3 to 16:9, that they would have to chop top and bottom in the original to make it a widescreen, which is sort of the opposite. My brother and I were talking about this the other day. It's sort of opposite of what happened with movies. When movies went to television, they pan and scanned, which is where, so you have a widescreen, you're going to television size, which is difficult to do because so many movies in the 50s and 60s and everything onward was widescreen. And then trying at the time to put it on a box, almost a square frame in your television. So I guess this is a theory. So I guess what's happening is that originally we shot in Super 16, which was more of the square television version, but that in fact there was much more negative hanging out there, and they didn't have to go back to the original negative to get it because it was on the digital transfer, right? So they went back to the digital transfer and were able to grab the larger aspect ratio. Actually, I have no idea if that's the case, and I need to talk to somebody about that. Obviously, I don't think AI could have reconstructed, the rest of that Vaccaro scene.
Not yet. Maybe in the future, but
and it would have cost trillions of dollars, which they're not going to do. So obviously the negative was there. I I don't think we shot open gate because, I remember, we changed, when we changed film, there's the gate that we're squirting the air into, to make sure there's no hairs or there's no scrapings in the gate. Yeah, so I don't have an answer for that, and I'm embarrassed that I don't. But so that's a
No,
good
that's
question.
right. I was just intrigued
Yeah,
because I was
no,
worried it was going to be the other way, because it happened
yeah,
with The Wire, I believe, didn't it? I think later seasons they tried to make it 16:9 and they cropped in, and I think they've reversed that now. I don't know. I'd have to
yeah.
double
And
check.
and
But yeah,
when you watch now old episodes of shows like when you watch the Carol Burnett show, which is really old school television, often the wide shots you don't see it as much on the close-ups. You don't notice it as much because if you give somebody a haircut down to their eyebrows in a close-up, it still looks right, right? But if you're in a wide shot and they're cropping it and they're cropping the tops of people's heads off, you notice it. So I noticed it in old school television transfers where they've had to crop to make it widescreen so that there's not a bunch of black areas or gray areas, which is what my DVDs have if I go to that aspect ratio on the sides. So yeah, obviously the negative was there for them to grab it. And I was thinking, I didn't do a side by side like you did, but as I was watching it, I was conscious of watching to see if I thought it looked cropped, and I never did. So, and you just provided the answer this morning. There was enough negative there, at least most of enough negative there, not to have to crop, or to upset the balance of the original framing, right?
yeah,
But also, I thought was really interesting. I want to say to viewers that are new to Homicide, watch, keep going after you watch the first season. Keep going. Or if you watch part of the first season, you're like, oh, it's kind of drab. It's kind of this. It's kind of that. I mean, I think there was an effort early on to make it desaturated. I wasn't on the first season, but to make it desaturated, to make it very use the verisimilitude, make it very lifelike and not too much artificial additional lighting. So when you get to season 2 and especially season 3, I noticed even more. It is more colorful. The lighting is different. It may have also been the idea that it was going to be super run and gun in that first season, and that there was more time taken with lighting on the second season, or it just was the different style. Like, I'm going to make this look like a room that I walk into. The squad room's going to look like a drab squad room I would walk into in real life. And then it becomes, I noticed, especially in season 3, in the evening shots, well, even in the daytime shots, there was a lot more light pumping through the windows in the coffee room area that was spilling into the squad room. So you would see this swaths of light coming into the squad room from the lamps outside that are really pushing that daylight through into the squad room. And then in addition, I think we talked about this earlier, a little more drop off in the background. So the actors are lit, the background's lit less, but then also splashes of light, like not fill light, but sort of spill light across different parts of the squad room, across the file cabinets in the background, that wall of file cabinets before you go into the coffee room. And also, and I don't know if you noticed this, the aquarium is lit so that it actually looks like an aquarium. By the time you get to season 3, it has a sort of a funky teal bluish cast to it that makes it stand out. Now, it made sense originally. It was called the aquarium because it's glass enclosure, and that's where the people waiting to talk to the detectives sit, or waiting in between being interrogated. But once you get to season 3, it actually feels like you're looking at an aquarium because of the color. There's a lot more colorful light splashing here and there, and highlighting things. So I would tell people to keep going, because obviously the first season, absolutely beautiful. The writing from the get-go, the writing and the acting from the get-go is absolutely wonderful. And it struck me, even though we've been rewatching this for the podcast, and rewatched the whole 7 seasons before we started, it struck me even more this time as I was watching it that not only was the casting incredible of who they got for which characters, but then who they put together. The chemistry between each of the partnerships is so good. And obviously some of it is, opposites attract. It makes it more interesting when you have two opposite people working with each other, which is the case, with Melissa Leo and Danny Baldwin. Their characters are very different. And Belzer and Ned Beatty, very different. Kyle and Andre, Clark and Cressetti, John Polito, all very opposites, which makes for this like constant sparks. Even when they're not disagreeing about something, there's just the constant spark. So kudos to obviously everyone across the board, including Gail Mutrix, who found the book to show to Barry, and Barry recognized great, would make a great series, not necessarily a movie, all the way down. So, and in answer to your question, also, I think that it looks more cinematic from season 2 on. At some points, it's so the new digitally restored transfer, blah, blah, whatever they did to it, is so clear. The grain is I haven't seen the first season. In some of the dark areas, you can still see the 16 millimeter grain. Later on, it is so clear. It looks like live video. It almost looks in parts like a soap opera, which is, basically live video. So the clarity of it at points, it's beautiful, but also is like, wait a minute, where'd the gritty go? And I feel like they almost de-grittied it a little bit.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's so pretty. It is very pretty. But
because the grain is slightly missing now. You can't. Funnily enough, there's a really good film called The Holdovers that came out early this year. I don't know if you've seen it. It was shot digitally, but they added all the 35 millimeter grain in post, and it looked amazing. It looked like it was shot in the sort of 70s when it's set.
Yes.
And it does.
Yeah, and that was absolutely, like you said, purposefully made to look like a 1970s movie, even in addition to the credits at the beginning where he puts the date 1974 at the bottom. It's like, copyright 1974.
That's it. Yeah. They did a really good. So maybe they missed a pass with the grain a little bit. Maybe they have taken too much of the grain out now, because it does look a bit more like Law and Order than and I don't mean that as a criticism. It still looks amazing, but it does look a little bit crisper and a bit more like a regular cop show in that regard. There's no real mega grain, which I remember from when I watched. I mean, looking at the side-by-side images, I mean, it's amazing how grainy and desaturated it looked and how used to it I was. And now it's like, wow, this is so different. So it's quite crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. And the question is was that conscious on a visual level, like we're going to make this look the best we can, or is it also conscious on what does a 2024 audience expect to see?
Yeah.
Is a 2024 audience going to like 16 millimeter grainy, even though it wasn't grainy, super grainy before? It was part of the presence of what the film, the show looked like. So was there a conscious decision just to make it look better and to it's not even restoring it, it's bumping it up, a bunch of different levels of resolution and clarity. Which is kind of amazing, just I think technically, and what computers can do. Or was it also a conscious decision to make it look more like a 2024 cop show so that it would fit more seamlessly into people's viewing? Like, I don't know.
Makes you wonder.
That's another, maybe the whoever from NBC Universal was checking out my LinkedIn page. Maybe I should find out who that was and ask them. We need to know the inside scoop on that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And there's one other thing in the Cressetti episode. So, on the Facebook groups, there was a complaint about the Cressetti episode, apart from the music, where when Pemberton is dressed in the full service uniform, in his blues, and I can't think of what the expression is for that now. He does a sort of salute, and when the reveal
dress
of
blues,
him,
yep.
that's it, dress blues. So the
Blues,
reveal
yep.
of him is this sort of post-production slow motion. So it's not proper slow motion. It's sort of this weird post-production slow motion that worked well in the original version. But when you watch the new version, they've removed it, and it's just at the normal speed. And I think I know why that happened, because when you're doing the digital transfer, etc., that's a video effect that was put on. So they've probably come away from the original. I don't know the ins and outs of this, but they've come away from the original edit, and so they haven't used that effect. And because if they just did a scan of the original edit and just used a computer to kind of up the resolution, obviously it would have held up, but it would have made the image look a bit fuzzy. So to get clarity, they've obviously gone back to some original either negatives or files or something, and that effect's no longer there. And I'm assuming nobody has brought in each director to kind of relook at the thing. So somebody somewhere missed that effect. I don't know. Does it make a huge difference? It sort of weirdly, I was conscious of it because obviously somebody had mentioned it. So I thought, I'm going to look out for this. So I don't know how I feel about that effect going, because the effect did look a bit naff, but at the same time, emotionally, it worked. So there are little touches like that have been adjusted as well. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, so that's interesting because I think it goes to the question, and maybe another person told me before it was announced that they were working on the transfer for the streaming. Maybe I can get in touch with that person who might have some insider knowledge on, because that begs the question of how deep did they go? How many layers back did they go to which level of original to then reprocess it forward from there? So that's interesting. I haven't I only watched the first 10 minutes of Cressetti this morning, so I didn't get to that last shot.
And I only knew of that because of it was mentioned on a Facebook group, which is the Waterfront. And then obviously I went looking for it, and I had my nerdy side-by-side comparison. But it was, I noticed it. It was like, oh.
Yeah, and I wonder if I had watched it without thinking about it, if it would have stuck out to me that it was different. Because what happened with that original later slow-mo, the slow-mo put in later, it adds a bit of point, right? It adds a period to the sentence there. It brings more poignance to the scene because of that effect and that slowing down on Andre. So interesting. If I would have, I absolutely remember what it looked like before. I absolutely remember that. But if I would have noticed the difference in watching it again, that's a good question. And then as to the music, that's also interesting. I wanted to jump up at a couple spots where I wasn't thinking to myself, I'm going to listen to the music and see if it sounds different. I wasn't really thinking that. And I remember what episode it happened in again, but the first time it happened, I don't remember what episode it was. It was in the first season, I think. And I think it was a street scene. I remember thinking that is some kind of disco library music and not whatever original track was in there, but I didn't jump up to compare it to the DVD. And then it struck me, and whether I was correct or not about this, because I also didn't go do a side-by-side, was a couple places in Bop Gun, the opening scene with the kids playing basketball right before Robin Williams' wife gets shot. That music didn't feel as edgy as I remembered.
Yeah, because I think they play Seal in the version I've seen. I need to rewatch. I haven't watched the Peacock version yet, but the version I remember, it has Seal. Oh God, what's the tune? I can't remember the tune now. But do you remember what song it's supposed to be?
I just remember it being an edgier feel. No, I just remember it being and I may be wrong, but that felt off. And there was it seems to me, another scene in Bop Gun that I thought because the music was always so unique. There was a couple spots that it didn't sound like unique music to me. Now, I may be wrong. It may be the same music. But then I jumped ahead out of curiosity to Full Moon, because Full Moon starts with some really good music, and it escapes. I know in my brain who it was, but I think that opening to Full Moon is the original music. So then I wondered if I was wrong when I went back.
No, it might be there were just some songs on some episodes that just cost way too much money, because music clearance is seriously expensive and quite complicated. Because I once worked on a documentary where we had to do a lot of clearances. It's not just like there's not just one singular clearance of music, because you've got the composer's rights, the musician's rights, and there's like 3 or 4 different rights you have to clear and pay for. And it can get horrendously expensive. And with a TV broadcast, most in the UK, for example, the BBC, they pay a certain amount, a flat fee, to be able to use any music they want in something. But then that has a problem later on with DVD or VHS releases, because those rights might not transfer over to a home release. And obviously, this is what David explained to us a while back, was that obviously the music rights, they hadn't considered streaming, and I think they had anticipated DVDs, but they hadn't anticipated like new future formats, which then obviously drives the bill up even more. And I guess somebody somewhere at Universal, maybe they're testing the waters. There might be a re-release again later on where they might put the music back in. Who knows? I don't know. It's a very difficult one, but it sounds like a corporate decision a little bit.
Yeah, and I didn't know that it would necessarily be different outside of the U.S. So that's interesting to me, that what you said earlier, that the music, obviously they didn't have the rights for international, only for domestic. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. Well, this is it, and so like Cressetti, to me, all the music sounded exact, and it was exactly the same as the version I've previously owned. And then I remember years ago watching, I'm a bit of a Miami Vice fan too, and there's a particular episode, Calderon's Return, that's at the end of Calderon's Return, or the beginning of part 2, is this really cool montage, and the American version has this completely different song to the one I remember. So the one I remember is Red Rider, oh god, what's the song called? I can't remember the name of the song, but it's by a group called Red Rider, and it's appropriate to the scene. It works. And I always remember it that way. And then when I bought the DVDs, because they re-released the DVDs a few years back, the music was totally different. And the version I got was and the DVD release over here for my advice was the American version. So they cleared it. But it was totally different to the recording I had from the television. I was like, my God, it's totally different to how I remember this. So it's quite funny how music rights can change, and also like with Miami Vice, music was such an integral part of the show, and also I guess they thought about the regions it was being broadcast in, and maybe even adjusted the music for Miami Vice to the region to help sales of music in that region. I don't know. It's beyond me, that. But there's all sorts of weird, complicated things that happen with music, and then showing things internationally. So it might be, yeah, I wonder if the Homicide we're seeing now might be some sort of more international version where some of the music was changed in the past and nobody has kind of noticed.
Yeah, and when I got to Cressetti, I did feel like that music, on the open where they're pulling him out of the bay, was the original that I remembered. Yeah, that one didn't strike me as different. I think maybe the Full Moon, the Reverend Horton Heat was in Full Moon, and I think that might have been him in the opening. The opening music anyway.
Yeah, but there is apparently a Reddit group where somebody has written down all the variations. So if this bit is, if the music is important to you, which I can understand it is, there are some Reddit threads about it, and certainly the Waterfront Facebook group, which is the one I'm a member of, they've linked to that and mentioned it. So it's so they're obviously so it's far from perfect, the digital release, but all that aside, I'm so glad it is available on streaming. It makes it a lot easier to watch the show, because even with our rewatches, we've had to for convenience, I've had to resort to watching episodes on YouTube from time to time because it's not always been convenient to get my box set out because I share a TV with my wife, and my wife isn't as enthusiastic about Homicide as I am, even though she loves Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Andre Braugher and Raymond Holt. So, but unfortunately that angle didn't quite sell it. But so, for the interest of my marriage, I've had to resort to using YouTube from
there
time
you go,
to time.
yeah.
But now we've got it on Peacock, and so, thank goodness.
Yeah, and it's interesting. In the original broadcast on NBC, when it was, live on, Friday night or Thursday night, whatever, I can't even remember what night it was on. The credits went by so fast, and they were tiny at the bottom. And so when the DVD came out and it had those really nice big, credits in Courier, that little sort of typewriter style, they still go by kind of fast, but not as fast as they used to go by, and tiny when they were broadcast. And so it was nice to see that they retained the credits from whatever the DVD version was. And I would encourage people, and I know Peacock won't like this, but turn off your autoplay at least once, and slow up and watch the credits, because the people that created this show from the sort of a different crew, first season, the rest of the whole thing, and it changed often. Like we said, that we had 7 or 8 different boom operators. We had a lot of different people on the show. Take a minute to look at the credits and give props, give a little hand clap for the crew, because their names are easy to read and easy to see in this version, more so than they were originally broadcast, which is fun. But yeah, on the whole, I think it looks great. And there was a comment on Facebook from Jean about how great he was happy with it, about how great it looked. So that was cool to hear from him.
Credit to everybody involved in this show. It stands up. It just really, watching it on Peacock, it almost looks like a new show, but it stands up, and it stands up to the test of time. So, congratulations on everybody involved with Homicide, that it actually doesn't date horrifically, doesn't date as badly as Miami Vice. As much as I love Miami Vice.
Yeah, it barely dates. Every once in a while, I think it's the first episode, first season, with the really good running joke between Belzer and Ned Beatty about Montel Williams. I'm like, okay, I hope everybody remembers Montel Williams, although he was in the news yesterday for some reason. I don't know if it was around the DNC, around the convention.
Yeah. Oh, wow. No, I wound my wife up with that. I was like, I'm not Montel Williams. I'm not Montel Williams. I was, who's Montel Williams? I'm not Montel Williams. It's great. I love that bit.
So there are some references that people of a certain age and people from Baltimore, will get. One thing I did want to say and I don't know if it's because the transfer, like you said, maybe even shows more and is clearer, that when we were shooting it and when I was watching it originally, I'm from here. So when there's a shot of the pagoda in Patterson Park, or when there's a shot of the administration building at the Baltimore Zoo, which is this beautiful old wooden probably 100-year-old building, or if there's a shot of some other iconic site in Baltimore, it's Baltimore to me. I don't really notice it, but I really noticed it for some reason watching it this time, and it might have been because having just come off the Olympics, where they made an effort to use the iconic locations in Paris to show off the city. And I'm watching and I'm like, wow. And obviously they did it on purpose. They did it on purpose when they wrote the show, to show off the iconic places in Baltimore. I mean, there's even a shot with Yaphet and Michael Constantine, who is the retiring shift lieutenant on the second shift. Or the other shift, and they're sitting in front of his row house in Little Italy, and there's this beautiful shot down the street of Little Italy, or as we say here, Little Italy, and there's a number of places there: the zoo, Patterson Park, Little Italy. There's one even this morning I noticed. When Isabella and Danny are at the train station, which is now a museum, the B&O original roundhouse, in Baltimore. This is an amazing, beautiful structure that's been restored. And it starts where you can see the roundhouse, the roof of the roundhouse, and this beautiful building in the in the background with the train yard in the foreground. And it struck me this morning, and there's another iconic Baltimore building location that really is beautifully highlighted. And maybe it looks better now, and that's why it stood out to me, or just, I don't know, my consciousness changed about it. But that also struck me. And I was on the phone yesterday, I guess it was yesterday, with Leslie Streeter from the Baltimore Banner, who lived outside of Baltimore for a long time and talked about how nostalgic it was. But she said as she's rewatching it, it's like falling in love with Baltimore all over again. And so I think, people who haven't seen the show before will get a really nice feel for it. And then one of the NPR, Eric Deggans, did a piece on the show coming out on streaming. And he made a comment, it was like shot mostly in Baltimore. And I wanted to call him and say, okay, I guess you could argue because of the crossover episodes. That's one thing. I just also want to ask about that. But, it was shot in Baltimore. It wasn't partially shot and the stages were somewhere else. It was shot, all 7 seasons and the movie, all was shot here. So I wanted to make that clear. I read something or saw something that said the streaming of Homicide on Peacock doesn't include the Law and Order crossovers. And I thought, does that mean, obviously they're not showing the Law and Order episode side of the crossover, but are the Homicide side of the crossovers episodes, are they there? I didn't look forward and look in to make sure that I would assume the Homicide side is there.
I would imagine they are. I guess you would have to just then hunt, because Law and Order is available on streaming. It's in the UK, I think it's partly on Amazon, partly on Netflix. So I need to try and find those. Actually, it'd be interesting to know. But I suspect, because on my DVDs, certainly I've got the Homicide side of the Law and Order stories.
Sure. Yes.
So I would imagine, and I could be wrong here, but I would imagine they are on here. It'd be silly not to, because they're part of the Homicide story.
And the continuing story arcs. Yeah, and so that would, and if there is any, I guess there wouldn't be a notation. Would there be? I did actually scan forward and look through all the blurbs about each episode, and I don't remember any of them saying crossover with the New York detectives, or maybe they did, and maybe the blurb said that. I don't know, but that's something I didn't look for. I haven't gone quite forward enough yet for that, but on the whole, great to see it so available, and it looks great. And like you said, with the transfer, it doesn't look like it's been chopped as far as the aspect ratio.
No, so no, because I was scared. I was very scared that might happen, and thank God it didn't. So well done, because otherwise there'd have been a whole other set of complaints about that. But there we go. Well, I'm gonna have to wrap up in a moment. But do you have any sort of final thoughts? Or
no, just I like I said, I hope that I did see a comment online from somebody somewhere. But I don't think it was for the Peacock version. I think it was just the earlier versions, or people looking at it on YouTube. I don't know. That I looked at this and I don't really understand why everybody thinks it's so great. I really love Chicago, whatever, PD better, and those kind of shows. And I think we have different sensibilities now. People have different sensibilities the way television looks. And I would just say to anybody, any new watchers, any new audience for the show, listen to it, keep going, go past the first season, because that's only 9 episodes. Keep going, and I guess at a certain point, if by season 3 you're not just totally sucked into how good the writing and acting and how the whole thing was put together, okay, whatever, you don't like it. But I just hope that people sit with it and give it a chance and let it sink in, because it is absolutely beautifully written and acted and put together. I mean, the White Glove, the 3-episode story arc with the White Glove murders with Pembleton's religious and ethical conflict with God is so poignant and so touching and so well done. Just keep going. New watchers and listeners, keep watching.
Yeah. It's not a classical procedural. It's not a classical case of the week. It's much more character driven, much more philosophical. Obviously, there are tensions within the way the show was made that made it a bit more case of the week towards the end, because obviously the first series is so character driven and obviously got ongoing cases that last for the whole season and beyond with Vadina Watson and that thread and all that. But I think also, interestingly, we are in that period of TV kind of used to serial storylines and stuff on TV. So weirdly, Homicide was a bit innovative in that, and then at the same time, it's not a classical procedural like Law and Order. It's a very sort of different type of show. And I've always said it's a show much more about life. It's all about people talk about life whilst investigating death, and that's what makes it so poignant, what makes it stand out. I found watching Cressetti quite emotional today. I had to go for a little walk afterwards because it kind of brought back memories of losing my father. Not that I lost my father under similar circumstances, but I watched it around that time, and the themes of loss and how one deals with loss, etc., kind of brought a lot of emotions back that I had to kind of go and process for half an hour. And that's what's so great about this show. And that's what makes it stand out, I think, and makes it stand the test of time in comparison to other shows that are much more about just the case of the week. So so it's
Absolutely.
definitely worth your time.
Yeah, definitely a number of layers deeper than most. I'm not going to say all television, but than most television cop shows for sure.
Yeah, indeed.
Terrific. Yeah, let's pop that cork. Hold on. There we go. Woo! Pop the cork.
Nicely done. Hey.
Yay.
Well done to everybody. But yeah, no, thank you everybody for listening. And again, congratulations to you, Susan, and the cast and crew of Homicide. Finally, you've had your moment. And I hope this is the beginning of a new chapter for new fans to find the show, and it gets a new lease of life, which it richly deserves.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. Everybody, keep watching. And then once you finish all 7 seasons and the movie, start over, because you miss things, and it continues to be delightful and also funny. It's a funny show. In between the poignancy and the drama, it is funny, like knife edge funny. It is like laugh out funny. Loud funny, and unexpected funny outbursts.
It's one of the funniest shows around. Weirdly. There we go. Well, we're going to wrap up, but thank you everybody for listening, and we will catch you on our next episode, which is with Isabella Hoffman. So
yes, I wasn't sure if we were going to tease
Russert.
that. Yes, please come back, because you're getting to see Megan Russert and Isabella Hoffman in that really complicated role for her, and with a terrific interview coming up with her.
Yeah, so stay tuned.